Today, we're going to discover practical techniques and insider tips for successful fibre reinforced polymer construction and dive into real-world challenges, smart solutions, and lessons learnt from the field, giving you the edge on your next FRP project. Good morning and welcome to our webinar on the tricks of the FRP trade. I'm Georgia Lance, Marketing Officer at Wagners CFT, and I'm here with today's guest speakers, Wagners CFT Custom Build Shed Supervisor, Ted Fechner, and Custom Build Team Leader and Carpenter, Guy Hargreaves. Ted is the Custom Build Shed Supervisor at Wagners CFT. With a strong focus on quality and precision, Ted plays a vital role in managing the fabrication of custom FRP structures. His hands-on leadership, keen attention to detail, and commitment to excellence ensure that every project meets the highest standards of durability, functionality, and client specifications. Working closely with his team, Ted helps deliver innovative, long-lasting solutions tailored to unique project requirements. Guy is the custom build team leader at Wagners CFT and a qualified carpenter, specialising in the fabrication of custom FRP structures. With a strong trade background, Guy brings expert carpentry skills to every stage of the build. His commitment to quality craftsmanship ensures each structure is built with accuracy and durability in mind. Guy's practical knowledge, combined with his leadership on the workshop floor, plays a key role in delivering reliable, high-standard outcomes for a wide range of custom projects. We're also joined by Wagners CFT General Manager for Australia and New Zealand, Ryan Leeson, who will be facilitating the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Welcome, Ted, Guy, and Ryan. Before we get started, just a few webinar protocols. We are recording today's event and will make the recording public via the Wagners CFT YouTube channel. You can ask a question anytime during the webinar via the chat bubble at the top of the screen. However, we will hold your questions over to the end of the webinar for the Q&A session. And for anyone having difficulty accessing the chat facility, feel free to text me your questions on the number I have just popped in the chat now. So let's dive into today's webinar. I will hand over to Ted and Guy.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ted Fechner, the Supervisor of the Custom Build team.
And I'm Guy Hargreaves, Carpenter and Team Leader with the Custom Build team. Today we're sharing some tricks of the trade, practical insights from installing Fibre Reinforced Polymer structures, or FRP for short. Whether you're new to FRP or have a few installs under your belt already, we'll walk you through the biggest tips and share some of our experiences that we've come across with our time here at Wagners that has improved safety, efficiency and quality on site. Today, Ted and I are taking you through some slides. And this is my first time doing anything like this, and I'm up first to take you through. So yeah, our first slide we'll have to show you is about material handling. So one of the biggest advantages with FRP is its weight or lack of it. Most members can be lifted and positioned by hand, reducing labour and machinery needs, also those nasty costs that come along with them. That doesn't mean you should treat it casually though. If you want a clean and professional install, by the end of the job, avoid dragging, dropping and sliding members on the ground or any other surface. Although our paint is durable, it will mark and scuff if handled roughly. If moving whole packs or just a few sticks from a wrap pack, be sure to use cardboard supplied under every pack we send if using a forklift, for example, just to protect the sticks during the movement on site. And if being lifted by a jib attachment, just make sure to use soft slings over everything else. Another thing with FRP, it stacks incredibly neat. Make sure your packs are organised so you can quickly locate what you need. Those itemised packs that we send are designed to save you hunting around. And furthermore, every member is labelled in the end of every stick, which there is a picture of as an example in a couple of slides' time. Another thing to mention is our stainless steel rails and brackets. They also will scratch easily if not respected, and even minor scratches can cause long-term tea staining. Keep them wrapped and on pallets, stored in buckets or anywhere on site where no damage can come to them, and just take them as you need. On our next slide, you can see the different FRP profiles we manufacture right here in Toowoomba, and the weights on each of them. As you can see, we have and use many different sizes, so no job is too big or small. So if you were to take notice of the table and look at our most common profile we use, being the 125 by 125, it is just a touch over 6 kilos per metre. So if you were to imagine a steel beam of that same size, there is a huge difference in weight. On our next slide, I'll talk a bit about materials getting to site. So when materials arrive, the first step is a stock check. Know exactly what you're expecting and what's critical for early construction. A loadout schedule will be provided to you via the truck driver upon arrival, so you will know exactly what is on the truck. Every job that hits our workshop floor is always going to differ, and there could be 1 or 2 truckloads, or there could be 10. So with that in mind, we do prioritise preparing members such as your piles, your bearers and joists, and along with any hardware needed to install them first. Just to help with the storage and congestion on site and in any laydown areas you may have, and just to help with the overall flow of the job. In saying that, separate priority items from your non-priority ones. It does save confusion later, and it stops teams digging through stacks, possibly mixing up members, selecting the incorrect member for a stage of a boardwalk, for example. You should also create a secure hardware storage zone, just like I touched on before. Missing bolts or hardware causes more site delays than any FRP ever will. Hardware we send, which includes, but not limited to, your bolts, nuts, washers, rivets, just to name a few, they all come in cardboard boxes. So having them under cover and locked safely in site containers is a must, as being left outside for a couple of nights collecting the dew or just a passing shower makes the boxes fall to bits, and there is nothing worse than having to carry around a soggy box of bolts. Moving on to our next slide. So one of the best parts about FRP is that most of the tooling, it is standard, off-the-shelf gear you can get anywhere at any hardware store. Honestly, Bunnings does have it all. But there are a few custom pieces we do supply. That includes the drill jig and the end cap grooving tool. The drill jig will be your best friend. It keeps the drill centered on SHS and RHS members, so you don't overlap holes or end up off center, especially when drilling through multiple walls of FRP, which is a real time saver. All you have to do is just clamp the jig securely and let it do the alignment work. It will keep your hole straight and your finishes clean. And just a reminder to always use your PPE, such as your gloves and glasses. To touch on the end cap groover, it is a simple yet effective way of notching the ends of members so that our plastic end caps stay in place. Ted will also talk a little bit more about the jigs later through the slides. Continuing on to the next one, we just have a picture of a grinder and a couple of different size demo saws, just showcasing the blades that we use. The correct equipment is important. I can't stress that enough. And yeah, moving on to our next slide. Our grinding blades, along with our demo blades, are all diamond coated to ensure a clean and precise cut every time. Our jigsaw and recipro blades are also, of course, diamond coated, along with all of our hole saws. timber, like your standard timber or steel cutting equipment, it will wear out fast. So if you want clean cuts and gear that will last and not burn the FRP, diamond coated gear is the answer. When drilling into our round sections, we use an arbor with a pilot drill to center our holes, and we drill through one wall at a time. And I do need to mention that wherever possible, use a wet cut or a vacuum adaptable tool. I highly recommend using a wet cut as it suppresses the dust better than anything else. When drilling for your rivets, use a glass and tile bit. They are incredibly durable and accurate. And just more recently, we have started using a masonry drill bit with a sharpened carbide tip, which again, both of these can be purchased off the shelf at Bunnings. And for our stainless steel rails, we use a carbide tip drill bit, just on a slow speed with steady pressure and some cutting fluid. One more thing I need to mention is every hole that is drilled and every cut that is made to the FRP on site, all those edges and holes must be sealed, which Ted will talk about shortly. And in fact, it is his time to start talking, and he will take you through the remaining parts of our presentation. So over to Ted.
Thank you, Guy. Next slide, we're starting to talk about pushing inserts. So when installing inserts on site, a lot of contractors will use timber offcuts or sort of anything they sort of have lying around site. It always seems to be a bit of an afterthought. But we use, and what we use in the shed and when we go to site is we use the steel pusher bars that we've made ourselves with sort of broader heads on them. This minimises the risk of damaging the insert and creates a good amount of moving force from the weight that the steel possesses, rather than a piece of timber or plastic, whatever else you got. It's going to absorb a lot of that force, your pushing force, and make it a lot harder job with a lot more effort. So when you start pushing inserts in, again, you need to make sure you've got the right tools. So you wouldn't use a steel hammer or a rubber mallet. You use a nylon hammer all the time. So a steel hammer will destroy the insert or crack it and deform it. And a rubber mallet will work, but it'll just bounce around a lot and be a lot more effort. So nylon hammers are the way to go. When inserting loose members, so ones that haven't been installed on a structure yet, and you're inserting them in your yard or just adjacent to the actual project, need a solid backstop. So it does take a bit of force to push these inserts in. So like I said, again, when we're doing it here, we'll use a concrete block, or on site, you might use your site container just as a stop. So you get the maximum amount of force when you're pushing your inserts in, and it avoids them sliding and bouncing around or falling off trestles or whatever else. So that is important, and like I said, most of the time that is sort of an afterthought. And then again, when inserting members that are already part of a structure, just being mindful and having that forethought to make sure you're getting inserts done before you start popping off your riveted brackets, because once you've drilled a hole and put a rivet through it, that's going to stop your insert getting past that location. So that's like I said, just a little bit more forethought and planning when you are working on when you are actually assembling these things in place. So more on this is on the next slide. So there's just a couple of examples. So on the far left, there's a 250 or 100 insert. So they have predetermined holes in them of a couple of different sizes. And the next one, there's a 125 square insert. Then we've got an example of a nylon hammer. So they have replaceable tips that, like Guy was saying, you can get from anywhere. Bunnings has them. So when those nylon tips wear out, you just screw them off and replace them. So yeah, once you push your insert into roughly the right spot to line up with your drilled hole, it's really important that we don't stick our fingers in the holes. So we use a pin checker or a screwdriver. Installing multiple inserts in the same member, the air pressure can build up. So if you look at that video, even between those two inserts, the air pressure is enough to move the previous insert already installed. So it's a good idea to put a screwdriver or a pin or something in there. So if that insert does move, you can lever it back into the desired position. And then again, like you would have seen in that video, avoid looking closely and directly over the hole when someone else is pushing an insert, because the air pressure from the insert will cause dust to push out that hole, and you don't want to have your eye over it when that happens. And again, gloves are mandatory when you're doing this. The edge of the composite and the drill holes can be a little bit sharp and can give you splinters. And also when you're hammering inserts all day, you're going to get blisters. So you've got to have gloves on when you're doing any of this stuff. The next slide. That's an example of a makeshift jig. So we often create custom jigs on site in the shed, like this one in the photo. It's used for drilling your bearer to joist connections. So you can go through and drill all your holes in your bearers before you lay your joists out. This speeds things up, improves consistency, and reduces the amount of measuring, the amount of times you've got to measure, and protects the brackets from damage. Because every time you use a bracket as a template to, if you use the bracket that's actually going to be installed as a template, you risk scratching it. So either the chuck of the drill spinning can grind the other wall of the bracket, or when you punch through the hole, the jaws on the drill can also dent and scratch the bracket. And that'll cause rusting if it's not cleaned up properly. So if you have these sacrificial brackets, you go along, do your pre-drilling and come back through, and all you do is pop rivet. It helps a lot. Just another quick note about when we're talking about drill bits, this at the end of every structure, you're going to have your abutments, you're going to have bearing pad that joins your concrete or whatever else your abutment is to your structure, and we have to drill holes through your hold down brackets. So make sure you're using a spade bit. You can use whatever you want, but we'd use a spade bit to drill through that rubber. It's a lot easier. Majority of what we supply and what we design is stainless steel. So any bolt or threaded rod that you're putting a nut on has to be anti-seized. So you have to put anti-seize on those threads before you start putting those nuts on. So as well as inspecting your threads for burrs or dust or grime or sand, all their stuff will help the stainless seize, and you'll know once you've seized, and once you've seized, there's not much you can do about it. You're going to have to cut it off and replace it. You don't really get a second chance. And then again, talking about these drilled holes, we need to seal them. So we supply touch-up paint. Every job can come with brush-on touch-up paint. Majority of colours will have a 2-pack aerosol spray can for your touch-ups. But like I said, even with these drilled holes, we need to be sealing them. And then even when we cut decking and stuff, we can also supply the high build Enduro seal. But then again, like Guy said, you can get that from Bunnings as well. And it's just to seal any of the cut edges of the composite to avoid moisture ingress over time. My next slide is talking about setting up and using the drill jigs. So Guy talked a bit about it. We'll talk about it a bit more. Wagners drill jig makes drilling square sections quick and accurate. If you start out by measuring the drill point, the corner of the member, then align the mark with the center of the jig, and so the drill will run straight and centre. You sort of see a bit of that on the photo. So the drill jigs are all 100 mil square, so it's pretty easy to find your centre and line it up with the mark that you put on the members to be drilled. Once in place, clamp the jig securely with a quick clamp and ensure the jig is sitting flat and tight into the corner. So if you put your jig on a bit of a skew whiff, you'll know about it when you finish drilling. So with these steps, you'll get the clean centered holes every time with minimal effort. You also need to measure it. You only need to measure the location of one side of the hole, and the jig will do the rest of the work for you. So you have the exact same looking hole on both sides of the protrusion member. So the one in the photo is an example of one we'll use in the shed that's set up for a 125 square. So I think it's measuring 62 million from the edge. But the ones we supply to site are fully adjustable. So the one jig can do any profile, any square or rectangle profile. This jig will be able to be adjusted and set, so you'll be able to use it on the variety of different members. So next slide. So all our inserts, we just have standard size inserts. Like it says there, your 14 mil, 18 mil, 22 mil and 26 mil is the hole in the insert, and that's the hole that you drill in your member. So depending on the installation methodology and the load requirements, we also pretty commonly are starting to use stainless steel crushed tube instead of the plastic inserts, but they require a larger hole. The design of the structure will dictate if plastic inserts or stainless tube are going to be used. You'll need to know what is going to be used, because you have to remember to drill the hole for each one of those options, remembering that every hollow section that you drill is going to have something in it. It's always going to have an insert or a crush tube for that reason, as an anti-crush support. The table down the bottom there is a pretty good example. So an M16 bolt, you drill an M18 hole and have a 18 mil insert. But if you're using a crush tube, you drill a 22 mil hole, and the crush tube, I think, is 21.7 mil OD. So it's pretty close to the size that you want. So like I said, just got to know the size of the tube you're using and drill your hole accordingly. Don't just, if you're new to it, don't just go off the rod size that's going to be going through the hole. Moving on. So we're talking about protective equipment and hazards. So big thing, the composite, when it gets wet, when the painted composite gets wet, it can be slippery. So when if you're doing a boardwalk or a bridge, avoid walking on the wet joists or bearers without some sort of protection. A lot of people, before they put decking down, a lot of people just use sheets of plyboard and run along, so they have a secure platform to stand on, so they're not balancing on the narrow members. And like we've talked about a few times now, but we can't talk about enough, is that if you don't wear gloves, you have a good chance of hurting yourself on these cut edges and these drilled holes. So next slide. So like we talked about, the touch-up paint we provide, it is a 2-pack paint. So all the safety requirements are on the side of the can, but you do need a respirator, and do it in a ventilated area. Cutting and drilling, like we talked about, creates dust. So you want glasses, you want gloves. If you can't do any dust suppression, you should be wearing just one of those simple P2 masks, just to avoid breathing in that dust. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of tools you can buy off the shelf. So a couple of the tools, couple of those demo tools we showed you earlier on can be wet cut. You can get wet cut circular saws, and then there's heaps of attachments you can get through drills and grinders that you can attach them to a vacuum and try to mitigate that amount of dust that you're creating. And mainly when you're cutting using a grinder or a saw, it's going to be loud, so you're going to need hearing protection. So our stainless brackets and handrail, when you're drilling these out and pop ribbing it off, there is the potential to create swarf if you have a bit of swarf that hasn't let go and you've drilled a hole, or if something's happened to your gun and it's not popping correctly, there is potential to have a little sharp tab sticking out from a rivet. So it's just sort of imperative before you move on that you check that and you fix them up, and especially before you open it to the public, because it can create a decent sort of hazard. That's pretty much it for us, and sort of wraps up our tricks of the trade. And we hope we sort of covered some of the topics that you guys wanted us to, and hopefully your next install is safer and smoother. And yeah, we'll hand back to Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ted and Guy. We're about to dive into our Q&A session, but just before we do, I wanted to tell everyone very quickly about the collection of content you can check out over the holidays. Looking for some inspiration over the Christmas break? Dive into Wagners CFT's on-demand webinar library, packed with expert-led sessions, practical insights, and the latest FRP innovations. Whether you are catching up on sessions you missed or exploring new topics, it's the perfect way to stay connected and inspired. Watch anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. So if you'd like to access the webinar library, use the QR code on the screen now, and I will also include the link in today's follow-up email. In addition to our webinar library, you can also catch up on our monthly newsletters. Each edition is packed with industry updates, expert insights, and the latest news from the world of FRP. Perfect reading for a quiet moment over the holidays. So if you'd like to browse our 2025 newsletters, use the QR code on the screen now, and I will also include the link in today's follow-up email. I'd now like to welcome Wagners CFT General Manager, Ryan Leeson, who will be facilitating the Q&A session of the webinar today. Let's have a look at some of those questions, Ryan.
Thank you, Georgia, and thank you, Ted and Guy. Righto, before we kick off, one of the things you talked about was anti-seize on stainless. Ted, obviously we use 316 in everything we do. Can you just explain how you actually apply that anti-seize and where you get that, or where people can get that from?
So yeah, it's another fairly common, fairly readily available material. If you can't get it from your local trade, then like a tooling shop, you'll be able to get it from, maybe even a welding supply shop. But it comes in a little tube, and the lid has a brush connected to it. And yeah, you just it's sort of a grey oily paste, and you just brush it on the end of your threads all the way around. Anything else you'd add to that, Guy?
Yeah, probably not using too much. You don't want to smother it. You just want enough that will fill the threads of any bolt or tube that you have. Having too much on it, when you're rattling it up with the gun, it'll sort of splatter everywhere. So yeah, just use it portionally. Don't smother it.
And yeah, with that, if you do use too much, it can get messy. So, and you want to do it just before you start doing your nuts up, because, like I said, it's sort of an oily paste that will attract dirt and grime and other rubbish. And if it gets on you, when it gets on your hands and gloves, a little bit goes a long way. So be mindful of that.
Okay, one for you, Guy. As far as packing, so how do we ensure everything arrives on site undamaged? How do you how do we go about packing our trucks and laying them out, and what do we expect people to typically have on the far end to unpack them safely? Like, do they need a crane and jib, or is it done with forklifts or tellies? How do we expect people to be ready to unload it?
Yeah, okay. So how we pack them here on site, we take the utmost care, making sure that we don't scratch or damage anything when it comes out of our paint booth. We have layers of foam between the sticks. We also wrap them anywhere where a forklift, for example, is going to be picking them up. So we try to beef up that area just with some bubble wrap and some cardboard, like I touched on before. And then it gets the full Wagners yellow wrap over the top. So everything on a pack that we send is completely covered, and nothing can actually damage any of those sticks that we send, unless if they get dropped pretty bad, then you're going to have an issue. On the receiving end, it all depends on, I suppose, the site locations and what is accessible to machinery. So there could be just simple forklifts that can unload them, like how we would load them here in the yard. We just use a forklift to load them on the truck. So a forklift to unload them. We also have crane trucks. So if no one's going to be on site, or there's only sort of one person, there is a crane. There are crane trucks that we do send, so they can just lift them off and place them down on site.
Yeah. So, and what tons? So, for just a general recommendation, what sort of tonnage forklift? Like, what do we use to load the truck? So, if someone at the other end has a similar piece of gear, that would work.
Yep. So the most common forklift we have here is a 3-tonner. It does majority of all of our packs. There will just be the odd occasion where there is a super heavy pack that can't be lifted. But again, there will be talks between obviously the project managers and whoever is on site running it, making sure that the correct equipment is down on the other end, so those things can actually get lifted off safely without any hassle. So on site, a 3-ton forklift is probably the way to go, especially if you've got a full truck, because if you're right at the top, yeah.
And we've quite often seen people unload them with excavators as well. Obviously, a lot of sites don't have a forklift, but everything can be slung off with an excavator if need be, is something else we often see. Hey, Ted, for you, on the rivets front, so just run us through, obviously, some of our structures. I think we did one a while ago that had 20,000 rivets or something ridiculous on it. Can you just run us through the different methods that we do have for popping rivets, and what we recommend or what we do on our structures here on site and when we get involved in the field?
So majority of the stuff that's going to be done on site is your boardwalks, and you're going to be using 4.8 mil stainless rivets. And another thing to sort of be mindful of with that is, because of these different size profiles that we have, different thickness brackets and different thickness walls of protrusion, we have different length. They're still 4.8 mil rivets, but they're different different grip lanes, so different size shanks on them. But for the tooling side of things, you can't do it by hand. You can't pop these rivets by hand, and you could try if you only had 5 to do. But like I said, majority of the times we're packing up these jobs, there's thousands of rivets. So what we've been using in the shed is the cordless 12-volt Milwaukee tool. I think it's $500 off the shelf, and they have them everywhere. And they seem to, the ones we've had in the shed, we've done thousands and thousands of rivets and not really had any problems with them. but there is several brands. So nearly every tool label has its own brand of cordless rivet gun, and then sort of the bigger brands, the specialty brands do have pneumatic rivet guns as well.
Okay, and just to cover off for us, Ted, so your team obviously do this all day, every day, but for a new contractor that's not familiar and has staff that are maybe more familiar with working with timber or steel, can you just run us through the sort of how people can get support, and maybe if you can run through some of the more, give us an example of some projects that you and Guy have attended over the years, just as an example of how far we'll go to give someone a hand to get started?
No, yeah. So Guy, myself, and a few other people on our team have attended sort of various sites, especially if it's someone that hasn't used our product before. Just those, even if it's just a couple of days, just kicking off, just running through a lot of the stuff we talked about today. So, cutting discs, drill bits, pop rivet tools, and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, where need be, we can come to site and help out. Like I said, even if it's majority of the time is before, we might do a week or a 2-week stint at the beginning of the project just to get the whole team up to speed, and sort of even help with a bit of the reading of the design and a bit of the layout and making a plan for what goes first and what can wait.
Example projects, Ted, where have you travelled for projects, and then hand over to Guy, where have you been for projects in your years?
I've been to several. I've got to travel around a bit. Been to in New Zealand, we did a clip-on cycleway at Chester Hope Bridge in Hawke's Bay, and that was an interesting one because we teamed up with a local sort of engineering mob, so boiler makers that were doing steel work, and they gave us a couple of bays in their shed, and they gave us some guys, and they took on the job of actually assembling these clip-on bridge sections. So I think we just sent the material over. I think we did. I think they were 10-meter long sections. So we'd build the girders, we'd join the girders together, we'd deck it, we'd put the handrail on, we'd put the balustrade on. We'd do the whole thing, and then we'd load it up with a truck and then drop it in on site. And that was really good. So we had someone there the entire time for that, just one person to work with, I think 4 people from their crew. So I was over there for, I think 3 weeks, and then one of the other guys swapped me out. But yeah, just the same sort of thing. If there's little jobs, we can just go and work with 1 or 2 people, or for big jobs, like I said, we can spend a week or 2 weeks on site and just give them a hand. Guy, where have you been anywhere fun?
Yeah, just trying to think now. So a lot of places in and around Brisbane, same with the Gold Coast area, done tons of bridges, boardwalks down there. I've also been up to Rockhampton, actually installed something a little bit skewy to what we normally do, but actually built a cricket pitch, drop-in cricket pitch up at Rockhampton. So yeah, I was away for a couple of days doing that, which was pretty fun. Been to Bowen, where's that, around Alley Beach. Installed I think it was about a 10-meter girder bridge, and I think a 15 or 16-meter folded truss bridge. Went up there and gave the guys a hand for a week or so. But yeah,
so I guess
we go everywhere.
Yeah, I guess the summary is that our guys have travelled everywhere. Ben, who I think's online today, has been to the UK. Ted, you've been to the US as well, I believe. So there's no sort of area that's too far. We'll come and give you a hand to get started. And we do have a program called our installation partners, where we that's sort of people that we've paired up with and been able to put them through training and help them get up to speed. And often one of the best ways to help accelerate that is to get them through site here. And we can get Ted and Guy and the team to run a bit of a training day and get a whole team up to speed nice and quickly and understand the tools and bits and bobs you might need. So question here from Ben, if a hole is...
So there's been plenty of times we've sort of built that relationship with the guys on site, and then we've left site and they've been able to they'll just give us a call or a message or send us a video, or they'll just hit us up, you know, just with little simple questions that could be, you know, we could answer pretty quickly, or that's something that could have actually slowed them down. But we've always got that sort of fairly open communication line.
Very good. Question here from Ben. Ted, maybe for you. If a hole is drilled incorrectly, are the FRP members able to be repaired and re-drilled?
In most cases, yes. You know, if we have that issue, here, we'll just touch base with the project manager in our office here. But like every job that's out on site has that contact. So either with a salesman or the project delivery member that's affiliated with that project, they'll be able to give you an answer. So some members would be quick, yes. Other members are more structural, and the hole might be in a bit of a concerning spot. It's just sort of reaching out, and these guys will be able to ask the engineers and sort of get a pretty quick answer whether it can be repaired or not. If we have repaired members, we'll just drill out another slug. So every time you use a hole saw, you have a slug left over. So we'll drill the appropriate size slug, and we'll just glue it in, sand it back and paint over it. You won't see it, but like I said, it does depend where the hole has been drilled.
Which sort of leads into the next one I had here, Ted, which is often a controversial topic or different opinions on it, is green stick. So do you recommend, different contractors have their own preferences, but if you were doing a stick build on a boardwalk, for example, would you order the stick with enough green to cut back on site, or would you prefer it cut to length with a couple of additional sticks provided? Maybe you just want to run through your sort of thoughts around the easiest way to go about it and what we recommend.
Yeah, I definitely think that you should. There's always going to be variances on site, especially boardwalks. We've got driven piles. There's always going to be that tiny little bit of variance. So as far as pre-cutting and even pre-drilling, it's a good idea that we do everything in the shed that we can, because it's be a lot more efficient if we're doing it in the shed. So like we do a lot of the time, we do handrail posts and tie braces, things that aren't going to change. But as far as bearers, bearer hole positions will change depending on the piles and the orientation of the boardwalk. And joists are always, like, again, if there's anything, if the pile's never going to be perfect, so the joists need to have that little bit of green on them, and it's a lot nicer. It's a lot nicer just being able to get a standard length joist and being able to drop it in and cut it to the exact length you want it, rather than, you know, if you weren't confident that everything was going to be spot on, then you had to dig through your members to try and find the exact right one for that position. It'll take us longer here to do that, and it'll also be more of a headache on site. So if that's the easy answer, is you should have them a little bit longer and just dock them up on site. With those demo saws we showed at the beginning of the slide, it's super quick and easy. You just give it a quick mark, you square it up, and just rip through it. It's very little effort.
Okay, and is there any other final bits that we have missed today that you want to add? If not, we'll hand back to Georgia. Thank you very much for facilitating, and thank you, Ted and Guy, for your participation. I thought you've been Very good guests. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, that concludes our presentation for today. A big thank you to Ted and Guy for their involvement, and also thank you, Ryan, for facilitating the Q&A session. If you'd like to share your thoughts on today's webinar, please feel free to complete the feedback form by using the QR code on the screen, or I will also just pop the link in the chat facility now. Or perhaps you'd like to be a guest speaker. If that's the case, you can fill out the feedback form and let me know. You could also reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a text, give me a call. However you want to contact me, I would love to hear from you. Our webinar today wraps up the webinar series for 2025. Wagners CFT will be closed from the 19th of December 2025 to the 5th of January 2026. Our first webinar for 2026 will be kicking off in February, and we'll bring you more details about that in the new year. Until then, we'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year period. We're going to go out on the video from the beginning of the webinar. Enjoy, and we look forward to seeing you next year.